Interlinked.
Interlinked.
You're in a desert, walking along in the sand, when all of a sudden you look down and see a tortoise. It's crawling toward you. You reach down and you flip the tortoise over on its back. The tortoise lays on its back, its belly baking in the hot sun, beating its legs trying to turn itself over. But it can't. Not without your help. But you're not helping. Why is that?
This is the Voight-Kampff test as it appears in the first Blade Runner movie. It's an empathy test that distinguishes baseline humans and the synthetic, the real from the replicants. In this test, the questions and answers do not matter. The turtles do not matter. It's a judgment that's based on how you react, but what actually matters beyond the test's criteria is what this test's existence says about Blade Runner's restrictive culture, a tool that maintains and reminds you of the status quo, a culture of dehumanization. So if you're a replicant illegally on Earth and you're caught by the VK test, you're done. No matter how identical you are to a human, if the VK detects that slight difference, the culture literally dehumanizes you and you'll be retired for being a replicant. But while 1982's Blade Runner resembles the Voight-Kampff test from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the book Blade Runner is based off of, the movie's test is treated a bit differently. Specifically, the accuracy of the VK test isn't questioned beyond a few lines.
Now, there's a Nexus 6 over at the Tyrell Corporation. I want you to go put the machine on it.
And if the machine doesn't work?
May I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
Have you ever retired a human by mistake?
Whereas Electric Sheep constantly brings up the effectiveness of the test on Nexus 6 models into question, and the ramifications of being wrong. After all, we do know it's outdated, so who knows how effective it is on the latest models. Catching androids based on empathy has led the Voight-Kampff test failing human mental patients who don't meet that standard. Wouldn't a human child mutilating a spider's legs out of curiosity be no different to a 3-year-old android doing the same thing? But despite all this, the insistence to use the test and tests like it are constant, showing how these characters strictly follow their orders and kinda desire that order, no matter how identical androids are to humans. By having the test have less narrative presence while going mostly unquestioned, the movie loses the gravity of what the test represents in a discriminatory dystopia. The book examines the culture that perpetuates the test, how bounty hunters justify their beliefs, and how their role as judge, jury, and executioner breaks them. This is what the test unpacks in the story. And through this, Philip K. Dick, the book's author, explores what the word android really means to him, and what it means to be an android as a human. So, allow me to share some quotes with you. I became conscious of the possibility of a very highly intelligent human being who is emotionally so defective that the word human could not properly be applied to him. And I used this in my writing with such terms as android and robot, but what I'm really referring to is actually a psychologically defective or malfunctioning or pathological human being. Androidization requires obedience, and most of all, predictability. What good is a flashlight if the bulb lights up only now and then when you press the button? Any machine must always work to be reliable. The android, like any other machine, must perform on cue. Would we become like androids in our very effort to wipe them out? If you kill a person because he is inhuman, do you not become inhuman in the act of killing them? The reduction of humans to mere use, men made into machines, is the greatest evil imaginable. So, in my opinion, while both narratives broadly explore the same themes, how Blade Runner and Electric Sheep treat the VK test is indicative of how each story approaches the same subject matter in different ways. There are two sides of the same coin. The movie focuses on how replicants are more human than we think, best shown with how Roy saves Deckard and how Rachel falls in love with him, whereas the book focuses on how humans are more like androids than we think, because of how society forces its humans to become Dick's definition of an android, best shown with how emotionally broken Deckard is by the end of the novel. And this process of androidization from the book is what the second movie's test explores.
But it's work.
It's work that molds them into a child worth having.
While still respecting the first film's continuity. The interesting thing about 2049 though is that it doesn't use the VK test. It uses another test to explore the topic of androgenization. But why? It's because of two things. 1. 2049 modern Nexus 9 replicants can be identified by barcodes in their corneas, so the Voight-Kampff test becomes unnecessary. 2. Even without barcodes, the VK just doesn't work on Nexus 9 models. It's possible that they're so biologically identical to humans that they bypass the test entirely, possibly referencing what Electric Sheep mentions here. Couple this with their specialties, they really are more human than human. They've even got an improved shelf life, living as long as they're useful. Unnecessary is the 4-year lifespan that's supposed to stop a Nexus 6 from developing emotions that lead to their disobeyal. Nexus 9s now have implanted memories, which I assume is an iteration on Tyrell's discovery with Rachel, where implanted memories made replicants easier to control. And on top of all this, to keep an eye on their obedience, a new test was made, at least for replicants working as Blade Runners. Because of how emotionally taxing or tiring one's kind potentially is, their psyches had to be constantly assessed to see if they've been, emotionally compromised. After all, you wouldn't want your gun to stop working just because it started to feel bad about itself. What good is a flashlight if the bulb lights up only now and then? So this new test is less about identification and more about compliance to 2049's oppressive culture. It's a form of dehumanization through social engineering, the greatest evil imaginable. Introducing the baseline test. Like the Voight-Kampff, it consists of being asked a series of uncomfortable questions, but unlike the Voight-Kampff, there is a baseline, a pre-memorized text that replicants have been assigned to keep in mind during the test. So during the test, a replicant must ignore the questions and instead listen for any words or phrases from the baseline text, and repeat said text without a hint of feeling. They can't respond in any other way.
Cells.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
Cells.
Interlinked.
Interlinked.
What's it like?
And since the baseline is about seeing if a replicant is prone to being emotionally compromised, the test, at its core, is to see if someone marked as inhuman is becoming human. As such, the baseline text, questions, and environment are designed to provoke an emotional response. It would be near impossible to be in that environment and not feel something. But the culture has decided that replicants do not have emotional responses. The state wants dispassionate murderers for its executioners. The economy demands uncomplaining workers. The perceived emotional shortcomings of the replicants have become a part of their assigned social function. You do this by stereotyping a category of people, then demand these people to perform that stereotype or else be met with violence. So a replicant which responds to circumstances like a human is declared defective and destroyed. There's no avoiding this. The culture is too rigid for acceptance. You can't be fixed. To malfunction leads to replacement. It's the norm. It's what's right. But when you first watch this baseline test scene, you don't immediately catch all that subtext. It's only when the test gets reintroduced later in the film, where we have a better understanding of 2049's world, is where you see the true scope and dread of this scene. And it's a great scene. It's the scene that has struck me the most from this film. And here's the wild part. That scene was actually written by the lead man himself, Ryan Gosling. And the baseline test and its repetitive interrogation-like characteristic wasn't created specifically for the movie. It's a thing from the real world. In fact, it has its roots in theater, and it's called dropping in. Developed by Tina Packer and Christine Linklater for the Shakespeare & Co. company, it's a form of training intended to reveal the multiplicity of meanings. To quote Gosling, "By dropping in, you explore the meaning of each word of the text by exhausting every conceivable context in which the word could be used." And to do this exercise requires two people, like the baseline test. You need a dropper and a participant. But opposite to the baseline test, dropping in isn't disorientating. It can be intense, but it's supposed to be comfortable, since it's an opportunity for an actor to explore the text by not responding with direct answers, but with feeling. There are no right answers. It's the epitome of don't think, just feel, even when those feelings contradict each other. And this, to me, seems like a form of micro-method acting due to Tina's quote here. It's a way to start living the word, of using the word to create the experience of the thing the word represents. Dropping in works like method acting by allowing actors to associate authentic emotional responses with their character's text. You're living the word. So you go from wanting to better understand the text to the sense that you now feel like you personally own and lived through that text. As bizarre as it sounds, this technique pretty much unlocked Gosling's understanding of Kay's character, which we'll get into later. So you may have a line like, "May all to Athens back again repair," but then each word gets extrapolated into a barrage of questions, which may end up looking like this. So when Gosling tried dropping into Kay's baseline, these 31 words worth of prose became an 8-minute long take. And because there's so much material that's paired with Gosling's intense staccato delivery, this allowed the editor to rhythmically cut down the scene to its bare essence. It's an attack on Kay's psyche, so it has to wrongfoot him and be hellishly aggressive. And once it was figured out in the edit, it was eventually refilmed as the brutal 40-second take in the movie, which was a huge deviation from the original script's traditional interrogation scene, and I'm glad they chose this version we're familiar with since it works on so many levels. This exercise as an actor is supposed to unearth and intertwine these newfound emotions with their character, to discover, dissect, and associate new feelings with text you're not super familiar with. It's a way of going from acting on what you think you're supposed to feel to feeling the essence of your text and your character. So to drop in is to be open to emotional exploration, an invitation to understanding. Whereas the baseline test threatens you to deaden your feelings. You cannot let those emotional associations be felt. The text has to remain empty syllables, or you'll be deemed defective. You are taught to suppress the exact feelings dropping in was designed to tease out. I felt that if that technique were extrapolated into Kay's experience, says Gosling, it could be used to penetrate his psyche. So by borrowing the trance-inducing effect of dropping in, Gosling ends up creating a scene that peers into Kay's psyche, but also Kay's relationship to 2049's world. To continue Gosling's quote, "I believed we could learn through a process of psychological erosion what his true emotional state was. I was very grateful for Denny for incorporating it into the film because it unlocked my understanding of Kay, but also provided insight into the state of mind of those who would force this burden upon him." Now, there's one more angle we can look at that gives the scene's theatrical background an extra layer. The baseline test was derived from an actor's exercise as part of the movie's production, but you can imagine a reading in which the baseline test is being used as intended by the replicants, as an actor's exercise. The formal reason for the baseline test is to detect and purge emotion in replicants, but the replicants know that, which means from a system is what it does perspective, what they're really being tested on is their skill in acting, their skill in being compliant. When Kay fails his second baseline test towards the middle of the movie, it's explicit that his boss must pull strings to prevent him being immediately executed. But she does it, implying when push comes to shove, the system is less interested in whether a particular replicant is becoming emotional. By necessity, modern replicants must respond like humans, so a replicant who feels things is not an error or biological limitation, it's a fundamental aspect about them. It's what makes them what they are.
Wallace needs my talent to maintain a stable product. I can't help your future, but I can give you good memories to think back on and smile.
It's nice.
It's better than nice. It feels authentic, and if you have authentic memories, you'll have real human responses.
Instead, they're more interested in whether they can show acceptance of their assigned role by way of performance. To do anything else, to express one's feelings means to be otherized and retired. Even in death, a replicant can't be interpreted as anything else but emotionless, inhuman.
He was a combat medic. Maybe he tried to save her and he just couldn't.
He didn't seem like the saving type.
Went to the trouble of burying her. A sentimental skin job. Sorry.
When even the best angel can commit actions replicants aren't supposed to, the wall that divides humans and replicants is clearly built upon arbitrary metrics and social expectations. Expectations that can be bent in favor of those who benefit from this segregation.
Every leap of civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. We lost our stomach for slaves, unless engineered.
How does it feel, killing your own kind? I don't retire my own kind because we don't run. Only older models do. I've never retired something that was born before.
What's the difference?
So what is the difference? Is this the reason why the VK test no longer works? Are Nexus 9 replicants 100% identical to humans, but are forced to act as something lesser? More human than human, but a slave to the culture? Whatever the answer, they're a group of people born to serve their superiors forever, and are forced to think less of their kind. To act out on anything else, to step outside the box the culture defines you, is a culture that doesn't want you to exist. So the weaponization of a bonding exercise seems perfect for the film, specifically a practice that has been largely taught orally. Because of the 2022 blackout, information from word of mouth and books somehow surviving and being repurposed well into the future is just a neat detail to me, such as what Kay recites during his baseline. Did you know it actually comes from a book? This bit of prose is specifically about a man recounting what he felt and saw during his near-death experience. Here's a bit more context. I can't tell you how I knew, but I did know that I had crossed the border. Everything I loved was lost, but no iota could report regret. A sun of rubber was convulsed and set, and blood-black nothingness began to spin a system of cells interlinked within cells interlinked within cells interlinked within one stem. And dreadfully distinct against the dark, a tall white fountain played. This is a part of a larger 999-line poem in Vladimir Nabokov's book, Pale Fire, a book Kay actually owns and seems to be working through.
Would you read to me? It'll make you feel better.
You hate that book.
I don't want to read either.
Now, what's interesting about the title of this book is that Pale Fire is derived from a line from Shakespeare's Timon of Athens. The moon's an errant thief, and her pale fire she snatches from the sun. The line describes the moon being lesser than the sun, for it cannot produce its own light, so it must steal to emit its own pale fire, which is the essence of the book's narrative. The book is split into two parts. One part is about John Shade, a man that has put his introspective thoughts to paper, weaving a poetic recollection of his life and memories, such as his near-death experience, which stands on its own as beautiful, well-crafted poetry. Simple as that. The other part of the book is an analysis of the poem by the book's self-appointed editor, Charles Kinbot, and he incorrectly asserts that this poem, through sheer ignorance, delusion, narcissism, and a lack of self-awareness, is about him. So, this personal piece of poetry that has no reference to Zembla, but is totally about this distant northern land that Kinbot is from, Kay, somehow, helped Shade craft this masterpiece. You could even say that this is his masterpiece. For better or worse, it is the commentator who has the last word. My work is finished. My poet is dead. When, in actuality, he, ironically, due to his ignorance and ineptitude and delusions, is merely a pale fire. So, to find meaning in memories that aren't your own, to feel special through interpretation and assuming you're the main character, this obviously parallels 2049's narrative, right?
Joy is anything you want her to be. Joy goes anywhere you want her to go. Joy lasts a minute.
coincidence?
A dangerous coincidence.
I always knew you were special. Maybe this is how.
She was a replicant. Pregnant. Am I the only one that can see the fucking sunrise here? This breaks the world, Kay.
A child of woman born, wanted, loved.
You imagined it was you. Oh, you did. You did. We all wish it was us.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
But despite his false memories, I don't think Kay is a pale fire. Unlike Kinbot, he's not an errant thief who willingly stole someone's light. He's not an inferior. He's only inferior merely because the system says this is how it's supposed to be. While true he's implanted with fake memories, he's able to make new ones. He's able to associate these new memories with feelings that are unique to his experiences and choices. He is able to move on from his misled conclusions of himself, and is able to interact and emotionally resonate with the world with new eyes. Instead of staying as an android, he allows himself to become human. He now fights for what he believes in.
Dying for the right cause is the most human thing we can do.
To be born through unique circumstances isn't what makes someone special. Instead, to have agency over one's life is what makes someone human. This is what makes a person special.
I always told you, you're special.
I do hope you're satisfied with our product.
I love you.
But of course, the culture doesn't want this. Replicants like Kay must remain predictable, homogeneous, compliant.
Do this now.
Kay is a person marked as subhuman who struggles with a desire to be free while knowing he'll be punished by acknowledging that desire. A desire that's constantly teased out only to be told to be forced to suppress it when reciting his pale fire text. And Kay's story shows us how brutal the world of 2049 is. A world that has a chance of hope, but whose culture wishes to suffocate any ember of change. And up until something changes, this is how it all plays out. There will be another Kay who will perform his baseline again and again and again with every replicant he retires, and again, he must suppress any meaning in an exercise that begs to be interpreted, that begs to assign meaning. But to assign meaning, to acknowledge one's feelings through weathering the world and feeling both hope and loss, you are then defined by your defiance and then deemed a defect, and the defective will be destroyed and replaced with those who comply, again and again and again. And blood-black nothingness began to spin a system of cells interlinked within cells interlinked within cells interlinked within one stem, and dreadfully distinct against another, a tall white mountain blade. Hey, thank you for watching. I've got a shop if you'd like to support me by getting my wallpapers and arts, or you can get them as a reward for joining my Patreon. Oh, and one more thing. Thanks to McClure for allowing me to adapt her work and use some of her prose in this video. Super chill of her to do. Link to her work down below. And yeah, that's basically what I've got. So without further ado, let me give thanks to my patrons. Finally got it. Thank you to Invo Yale, Richie Yim, Dip Sense, Tailored Muffin, Jeducible, Yumi, Dan Brown, Sailor Dog, Niz, Ratlung, Bad Randy, Taboo TV Cat, Enormous 98, Trevor Hoppin, Parker Murphy, FedEx, Locke, This is Stella, hope I'm saying that right, This is Stella, King Zane Tear, Psycho Groove 77, Axon 8, Tutsbot, Seti, Zindictive, Chris Manga, Toner B, Gob, and finally, Skylar. And again, thank you for watching. Ooh, fumbled there. And last minute addition, Cumbrad. Thank you for joining.